Okay, good morning, everyone. Just a quick comment, and I'll get started this morning. We've had a little bit of glitch with Zoom. I guess we have a number of people that have come on more on the speaker side. So if I could ask everyone to turn off their mics and turn off their cameras, that'd be fantastic. And then we can get started with the morning. So good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Calgary, Canada, the headquarters for Energy Now. Hopefully it's beautiful where you are. I'd like to welcome our energy audience, speakers, clients, innovators, and presenting companies, and all of our other industry stakeholders to our Energy Innovation Month long campaign and today's virtual conference. The Energy Now virtual conference and innovation showcase presentations will feature some of the latest, greatest innovation, technology, research from experts across the energy sector. Innovation and technology adoption is critical to the long-term growth and viability in North America. Now more than ever, the driving sources of energy are changing and expanding beyond the traditional oil and gas industry toward clean tech, emission reduction, and renewables. Energy Now is assisting and supporting this revolution by promoting, fostering, collaborating, and integrating new energy technologies, processes, products and services, equipment, research, systems, and all other types of innovation. Today's virtual event will feature our keynote speaker, Patrick Elliott, followed by a panel discussion moderated by Jeffrey Can and 4 of the leading innovation and technology experts across the energy sector. Lastly, we'll be featuring 20 top energy innovators for a 5-minute presentation for each organization. My name is Dan King, co-founder of Energy Now. My partner, Terry Winnetoy, and our entire team would like to thank you for attending today's Energy Innovation Conference. Terry and I launched Energy Now 7 years ago, almost to this day. It's been an amazing journey of growth, ups and downs, and many challenges. But like all of us, we meet these challenges head on, and we're excited about the future of the energy industry in Canada and around the world. A big part of the future for new innovations and technologies and processes, but most importantly, the people that will be blazing the trail for our critically important energy industry. So thanks again for joining us today. I'll be sharing the virtual stage this morning with my co-host, Jeffrey Can. Jeffrey is an author, educator, podcaster, and an inspired professional speaker. His passion is the oil and gas industry, and it's imperative to exploit digital innovations as we slowly transition to new fuels. He has worked around the world for over 35 years. He teaches a seminar on digital oil and gas, produces a weekly article and podcast on digital issues in energy. His first book, Bits, Bytes, and Barrels, The Digital Transformation of Oil and Gas, is being translated into Russian, and his next book, A Study of the Leading Practices for Digital Oil and Gas, will be published in early 2022. Thank you, Jeffrey, for joining me and our audience this morning. We're excited to have you with us, Jeffrey, and we'll be introducing our keynote speaker in a couple minutes. You will also be the moderator for today's panel discussion. Before we move on to today's speaker and presenters, I just wanted to first just run through the event schedule really quickly. The schedule has been broken down to 6 segments with different Zoom links. This allows us to prepare our speakers and our presenting companies. We send out a schedule with these different links, but for whatever reason, if you don't get the links or have some issues with those, please email me, because that's the easiest way of doing it, and then I can spearhead it and get someone on our team to deal with it. So my email address is daniel.king@energynow.com. So feel free to send it to us and we'll look after it for you. After today's discussions and presentations, Energy Now will be sending out an email to for all the recordings in today's keynote, panel discussion, and company innovation presentations. We'll also be sending out the contact information for the speakers and the presenters. And it would be like if you'd like to, you can reach out to them, ask them any questions, or request some more information. So sit back, enjoy the presentations and the discussions. You don't have to take notes. We'll make sure that you get those links. Also, would like to just a few quick thank yous to get started. Sometimes if we wait till the end, a lot of people drop off. So I just wanted to thank Jeffrey for co-hosting today's keynote and conference. Thank you to the companies and the presenters today. I'd like to thank the speakers. Their time is very valuable, and we appreciate their thoughts, experience, and wisdom. Thank you to all the Energy Now staff and team members. I'd like to thank EventWorks, who are helping us produce today's event. And finally, I'd like to thank all the registered attendees for today and being part of it. So I'd like to now hand over the mic to Jeffrey, and he will introduce our keynote speaker. Jeffrey.
Dan, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's always worthwhile to get your mom to write your intro because she'll say things that you'd never say yourself. And it's my pleasure this morning to introduce Patrick Elliott as our keynote speaker. When Dan first asked me to help organize the conference, he said, who do you think would be a great speaker for this? And you know, as you think about Calgary and individuals who are prominent in the community, Patrick immediately came to mind for me personally and professionally. I had the occasion to work very, very briefly with Patrick and his management team at Jupiter, and came to know the company and Patrick as a business leader, and really left a strong impression on me. So I reached out to Patrick and said, you got to do this. There's going to be a great audience, and what you're working on now is really fascinating. So just to give you a sense of Patrick's background, he is currently the chief operating officer for and co-founder of a company called Carbon Alpha. And this is a private company. It's focused on carbon sequestration as a service. And this is going to be a critical solution pathway for decarbonization down the road. Prior to founding Carbon Alpha, Patrick was the executive vice president and a co-founder at Jupiter Resources, which was a private Calgary-based company in the energy industry. I'm sure Patrick will tell you the story about Jupiter and where the name came from, but it grew to be the ninth largest natural gas producer in Canada. From 2007 to 2014, he was vice president of business development for another energy company, Cambrian Energy. Now, since 2018, Patrick, like many business executives, I'm sure he finds time for golf, but he also contributes immensely to the community. He's been an associate at the Creative Destruction Labs of the Rockies and was recently appointed as an investment advisor at UC Energy Transformation with the University of Calgary. Patrick, as you probably can tell, he's been involved in developing, acquiring natural resources, assembling teams for the better part of a quarter of a century, and deeply passionate about leadership, entrepreneurship, and technology innovation. He holds a BSc in geology from the University of Western Ontario, my alma mater, and he's a professional geologist with APEGA. I'm not even sure if there's a, Patrick, I'll let you do the pronunciation correctly. But without further ado, let's everyone give a nice warm round of applause for Patrick Elliott.
Well, good morning, and thank you to Daniel King and Jeffrey Can for the opportunity to speak today. And thank you for all of you who have taken the time to be with us this morning. On April 10th, 2014, my two co-founder partners and I walked down the hallway from our small windowless office that we had borrowed from a supportive friend with an envelope containing a $2 billion offer to purchase an entire natural gas producing business unit from Encana. And what ensued from that point was the best experience that I've ever had in my career. This is the story of Jupiter Resources told through the lens of technology and innovation in keeping with today's theme. I was fortunate to spend the early parts of my career working at Pan-Canadian as a recent graduate geologist. It was one of the last oil and gas producers to have a dedicated training program for new hires. I joined the energy industry when data management and organization was still very much analog. I recall using Fiche machines to print well logs, flipping through massive well files that were stored in centralized libraries, affectionately known as the cage, while having to push large carts to get the well files back to my office. This was the state-of-the-art data transfer in the mid-1990s. The fundamental flaws of the system didn't really strike me until the day that I took several well files home because I wanted to study some wells over the weekend. This ended poorly for me as I struggled across the street in front of the Palliser Hotel and dropped one of the well files. and watch the contents gently blow down the street in front of the palace or hotel. Now, from time to time, you might panic because your computer might have lost a file, or perhaps autosave wasn't functioning properly. But I'm here to tell you that this was a whole different level of panic. And this is when I first started to think that there could be a better way to manage data. At the end of my tenure at Pan-Canadian, when Encana, or after the merger to form Encana, I have to credit my first glimpse into the world of well-organized data management. And it came from a young enterprising lady who took a hold of the digital data chaos within our deep water Gulf of Mexico team and created a beautifully strict yet simple taxonomy that allowed us to find and use all the data easily. And this was to leave a great impression upon me. In the early parts of my career, I had the great fortune of being supported by mentors who introduced me to a world of entrepreneurism and innovation. I was busily working on advancing my career in search of hydrocarbons within the safe confines of the big company. But I was asked to tag along to meet and evaluate the prospects of enterprising teams that sprang out of large companies to seize upon the opportunity through their startup enterprises. I was inspired to be an entrepreneur, but truth be told, I didn't know how to do it. In many ways, my entire career had prepared me for the bold step that Jupiter was. While evaluating and sometimes investing in these startup oil and gas companies, I paid close attention to what made strong teams tick. Why did some companies and teams seem to have repeatable success and develop a reputation for success? And why did some teams fail and completely disband, seemingly overnight? Was the success of an oil and gas company purely anointed in its ability to find hydrocarbons? I was a good geologist, but I knew that there was always better ones right around the corner from me. There was an invisible force at play within the successful teams, and although it was not obvious to me when I was young, it has since become clear that leadership, people, and strong functioning teams matter, and they matter a great deal. On June 26, 2014, we publicly announced Jupiter's acquisition of Encana's Bighorn business unit, backed by our private equity sponsors. It was to be one of the largest, if not the largest, private equity-backed asset acquisitions in the history of Canadian energy industry. Our team of 3 had grown to roughly a dozen folks since our bid date only a few months earlier, and we set upon preparing to build a team to step into running a 40,000 barrel a day equivalent company at the close of the transaction. I can tell you, I still recall the sleepless nights, wondering how we were going to pull this off and how we could possibly attract the best people in the industry to come and join us for this journey. We were like a van full of well-intentioned renegades rolling down the highway on an adrenaline rush to plant our flag in the ground as a newly minted mid-cap gas producer. When I and my 2 co-founders set out to start Jupiter at a breakfast table in 2014, we placed great emphasis on the culture that we wanted to create and work in. We envisioned a transparent environment where employees felt empowered to challenge and debate anyone's ideas and were prepared also to be challenged, that they could be heard and they could be respected. But the precondition required is the fundamental understanding of trust amongst all of the team members. We were clear that if an operation didn't turn out the way we wanted it, that we were not going to punish them. But the quid pro quo was that we asked everyone, including ourselves, to be brutally transparent about the situation so that we could learn from our mistakes and make sure that we would not repeat them. We felt that if we wanted employees to be fully engaged and accountable, that they required the jurisdiction of increased responsibility and the ability to participate in the debate of investment decisions. In many companies and situations I have witnessed, employees would provide information which was absorbed and decisions would later emerge from the executive like a wizard behind a curtain. We believe that if we had the best people who are actively contributing to investment decisions, we would consistently generate the best business results. But to accomplish both these cultural and business goals, we recognized that data-driven decision-making was a fundamental approach that was required. However, to drive the analysis from the data, it had to be widely available, accurate, and easily accessible for all. We viewed data as a critical asset, and were clear that each individual did not own the data, but they were responsible for it. Data had to flow seamlessly throughout the organization, and to be a barrier to the flow of that data at Jupiter was not to be in a good place. These concepts tied our cultural and corporate strategy to our digital strategy. We believe that they are codependent on each other for success. I have found time and time again that in order to have a successful digital strategy, it needed to reflect the cultural and corporate expectations. And we set out with those principles at the heart of our organization. When we closed the acquisition on October 1st, 2014, natural gas prices were north of $4 a cubic foot. And we needed to stem the decline of the production base, which resulted from a lack of investment from the 2 previous years. We had just finished flying across North America, raising a high-yield debt note as part of our financing strategy. Operationally, we scrambled to find drilling rigs and completion services in a tight market, yet within 5 months, we managed to patch together 4 drilling rigs, and we were burning the candle at both ends to make sure that we operated safely, efficiently, and drove high performance. Our small team had grown to roughly 40 people within a span of a few months, and the executive team took it upon ourselves to interview each prospective employee and held that commitment throughout the entire history of Jupiter. We had to make a fundamental choice at the very onset of our company about how we were going to manage our data. Were we going to go down the well-established and familiar pathway of using Windows Explorer and on-premise storage services? Or would we take a bold step and use Microsoft's recently launched SharePoint platform for our corporate data management system? Things were moving fast, and we had to make this fundamental decision as we prepared to ingest a massive amount of data from Encana. I pushed us to use SharePoint solution. And there were many times that I felt that I was walking the plank in shark-infested waters as people's frustrations played out in meetings. But this choice was foundational in our ability to make data available, searchable, and connected. It was also during these early days of organizational growth that I observed something I've seen playing out over and over again in the oil and gas space, which is the seemingly simple, but likely primary source of chaos for most energy companies: the drilling schedule. The drilling schedule is the blueprint of taking a drilling idea and evolving it to the point where there's a big rig in the field drilling a multi-million-dollar investment. It literally involves every discipline in the organization and is usually very messy. So we struck out design our own process, first by engaging all the stakeholders involved. We mapped out the process of who should be active and when, and identified milestones and required sign-off. We wanted a digital process that was a single source of truth and accessible to everyone. We found an existing software platform that could accommodate our needs, and most importantly, allowed us to leverage hyperlinks from our SharePoint data management system that we get committed to earlier, so that we could instantaneously reference the proper approved documents. Ultimately, it was a scalable process that provided commonality for all of our operations teams to center around. There was one source of truth, and it drove all of our operations. I recall the day we launched our general well process in March 2015. And at that time, there were simultaneously 3 different Excel-based drilling schedules being used by different groups. Just imagine an orchestra trying to play 3 different pieces of music at the same time. I can assure you that will never be a bestseller. Our digital workflow was the first of many commitments we made to digital at Jupiter, but that one really started to shift the organization. But the other one that really started to move the organization was our push into data analytics. I was responsible for the upstream operations at Jupiter, which meant the geosciences, reservoir engineering, mineral land, drilling, and completions. Basically all the disciplines to define and retrieve hydrocarbons out of the ground and deliver it to the gathering system. I quickly came to notice that as we prepared for our quarterly board meetings, the drilling and completion teams spent upwards of 2 anxious weeks pulling together their results to report. The process was a grind and was consuming way too much of their time. I knew that there had to be a better way, but I had no solution. Luckily, we found the solution through a data-savvy reservoir engineer who had started working with Spotfire and our own internal data engineer who knew how to combine our data sets. We wanted to test our idea how to better capture and analyze data on the completion team first. We reformatted WellView, which was an operations field data capture system, to ingest only what we wanted to measure and streamline the interface to make it simpler for our field staff to input the data. We then accessed and captured it continuously and fed it into Spotfire to create data visualizations and to analyze our trends. I make it sound easy, but we had some incredibly talented IT data analysts, data architects in our organization who worked very hard to realize our ambitions. At first, admittedly, we were plotting very typical metrics that were obvious and did not need the efforts that we invested into the process. However, with time, we developed insights that were only available to us because we made the effort and commitments to gather and properly manage the data. As an example, one day we were looking at our drilling cost performance data and intuitively felt like we were drilling better, faster, and cheaper, but the data suggested otherwise. We had parsed the operational data as specifically as we could, and only through servicing the data through various visualizations we had created, we could see that there was a creeping cost related to our development program moving further and further away from established road and pipeline networks. The hard-fought improvements in the actual act of drilling were being masked by cost creep related to expected consequences of extending your development footprint. These are very important insights because in order to solve a problem, you have to know exactly where to focus on finding the fix. The results were so compelling that it started an avalanche of adoption throughout the whole organization. Soon we had transformed many of our staff into working data analysts and continuous reporting metrics throughout the organization, from production, facilities, HSE, to finance. Importantly, it forced the teams to connect and share data because so often one group's data impacts another team. I often get asked, how do you really know if the commitment to digital is a good investment? The real answer is you can't afford not to. The reality is that success will look like a number of small wins that cumulatively make a big impact. Sometimes there isn't even a direct result associated with the plunge into digital, but sometimes you will see that teams just function better. But consider this. Our systems provided real-time drilling and completion cost and performance data. Our drilling and completion teams were evaluated on their combined efforts to collaborate and find the best solutions to drive down costs on the overall wellbore. In many instances, drilling and completion teams are misaligned by trying to win cost efficiencies in isolation and usually at the cost of the other group. Our automated processes reduce the pain point of gathering and manipulating data and put more engineering time back into the hands of the engineers to solve problems. It allowed our young technical staff to evolve into data analysts who were responsible for generating digital insights into their operations. It was an investment into their career growth and skill sets. They were hungry to learn how to use the new digital tool sets and gain digital experiences. Current trends demonstrate that younger workforces will gravitate to those companies that share their digital sensibilities. One of our great stories is about a young facilities engineer who decided that he had an idea to build an app that would make the field operators' life and day easier. Typically, each day, the field operators would manually write down information from each well site, drive back to the office, hand bomb the information into an Excel spreadsheet, which hopefully was accurate at the end of a log day. And then the data was then combined into a master spreadsheet by another person. Convinced that he had a solution, we turned him loose on the Microsoft tool set that we had from Office 365. And he created a mobile phone enabled app that allowed the operators to quickly input the required data while they were at the well site, and then upload it to a structured database where real-time Spotfire visualizations were generated and analytics run against it. All of this automatically occurred as our hardworking operators returned to cell service and parked their trucks at the back of the office. Admittedly, at first, there was some resistance to the change in the process, But all that faded away when the operators started to arrive back home a little bit earlier each day, just in time for supper. But it wasn't all about the digital. We embraced the innovation mindset as an approach to problem solving and cost reduction. We wanted durable changes through real process improvements to save costs, not just by beating down on our suppliers, which we will likely give back through cost inflation. We had developed a process at Jupiter called Report the Ugly and Find the Fix, or the RUF. This was a cultural touchstone in our organization where teams that experienced a failure would bring it into the RUF session, where they would present the ugly, and anyone in the organization could attend, and everyone had the chance to help to find the fix. Mistakes were viewed as opportunities for collaboration, problem solving, and trusted environment that we had allowed people to be vulnerable and honest in owning the ugly and asking for help. Some of our biggest and best wins emerged from these RUF sessions. The proof was in the pudding. We operated in some of the most challenging subsurface environments with highly overpressure reservoirs and high temperatures, but we consistently drilled the longest lateral wells in the Spirit River Formation. We did this guided by the economic analysis that assured us that we could generate superior returns if we could keep the drill bit targeted in the formation by combining seismic in real time with our well site geologists and office geologists' well insights. But it was through innovations in drilling mud rheology that allowed us to set deep casing into zone and drill out with low viscosity drilling fluids, extending the bit life and improving rates of penetrations. Some of our geological targets were undrillable until we made this fundamental change to our wellbore design. The design also benefited the completions team's process, streamlining and lowering costs of their process by entirely eliminating the need to bring certain equipment out prior to fracking a well. We literally designed our way into expanding our economic opportunity inventory that was unobtainable for us until those innovations were created. Then in March 2020, the pandemic arrived. Like everyone, we were struggling with trying to figure out how to deal with this new reality. Thankfully, we had widely adopted Microsoft Teams as a communication platform for almost 2 years before the pandemic, which kept us operating smoothly. But it was in this confusion that we started our boldest digital move by initiating what we call the Operational Technology Committee. That held the greatest potential for our significant digital transformation. We leveraged technology and digital more than most, but there were some fundamental shortcomings within our own system that we needed to address. We still had siloed data systems that were not integrated across disciplines and allowed for combined data, performance tracking, and financial integration. Our IT group was trying to initiate processes and technology that didn't have the full buy-in of the field operations team because of confusion around intended outcomes, which then stalled efforts to capture new data that was necessary and being demanded by the engineering teams in-house. I initiated and chaired the Operational Technology Committee, and each discipline from across the company, including the field teams, had to nominate 2 non-executive representatives who, number one, understood and were motivated by the data opportunity and technology, and number 2, were seen as influential within their group and could lead change. The overall goals of the Operational Technology Committee was to have each discipline team define their data needs and sources, discover what other teams required of them, provide transparency so the disciplines could agree on corporate priorities of our data strategy, and ensure that the IT group, who would enable the technologies, had the support to steward the changes. And finally, apply a systems thinking approach to people, process, technology, and data for our designs. Our aspirations were to combine all the data flowing from the wellhead to the financial metrics into data warehouses where we could run real-time analytics on a single source of truth and make the shift from reporting to predictive and prescriptive actions. It also strengthened our culture by getting the Calgary office and field teams aligned. In one example, the production the Calgary production facilities team discovered a company that had an IoT solution that could provide operation teams with pressure data that they had never had in certain parts of the pipeline system. Through the interpretation of the data, the field team changed those operating parameters of certain pipelines, and it led to a production improvement of over 25%. Those efficiencies were significant, and they were only available to us because we had the data and took action. Looking back, from 2016 to 2019, our financial structure had always been encumbered by a significant debt load, which was appropriate for a $4 natural gas world when we started the company, but quickly it became a heavy burden as commodity prices fell during that time period. Despite that, our production base grew from 40,000 barrels of equivalent a day in 2014 to reach 80,000 by 2020, becoming the 9th largest natural gas producer in Canada. We did that by consistently producing some of the most prolific natural gas wells in Canada, and all at the lowest finding and development costs on a PDP basis in the basin. And remarkably, our team only had 50 people in the Calgary office and 50 people working out of the Grand Cache region. Despite that, or because of our success, and amid the turmoil of the pandemic, our shareholders had come to the decision that they wanted to seek liquidity from their investment. And by December last year, we had been sold and were placed in the history books of the Canadian energy industry. It was a heartbreaking affair to dismantle a company that we had built, the dedicated employees we had, our community involvement in Grand Cache, the suppliers, and the third-party technology innovators that relied on us to use their technology. I can't tell you the number of times that we heard from employees that being at Jupiter was the highlight of their career. For me personally, it was the single greatest growth period in my career, and like many, I put my heart and soul into our mission. I often say that leadership is both a privilege and a burden, and saying goodbye to everyone at the end felt like a burden to me. But the world's energy complex continues to evolve. I believe deeply in energy, all forms of energy. Energy has done more for human development than probably anything in history. But how that energy is created and delivered has dramatically changed. I believe the Canadian oil and gas industry will likely continue to consolidate, which means that there will be fewer companies and likely run with fewer employees. However, the surviving companies will become stronger as more barrels are handled by fewer hands, who will moderate production growth, return more profits to shareholders, and likely cause commodity prices to rise and stabilize, especially compared to the last couple of years. While the shrinking nature of the industry will likely be decried by many people as a result of inept government policy, and there are real challenges. There are real challenges in that situation. The ultimate answer to what's happened to the industry, and the reality is that a lot of the disruptive changes is a result of technology and horizontal drilling and completions. We've all heard it before, but the radical downsizing that we've witnessed in the larger companies over the past 5 years is still an artifact of adjusting from the change from vertical drilling to horizontal drilling. Over the span of my career, it's been absolutely incredible to see how prolific our horizontal wells are delivering energy and how few people are required to harvest that energy. At the same time, there is an insatiable movement in the world to decarbonize. Governments, financial markets, and citizens are demanding that emitters of carbon dioxide take steps to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide emitted to the atmosphere. Wind and solar sources are elbowing their way in to capture market share from the incumbent suppliers. Influential financiers like Mark Carney represent trillions of dollars committed to sustainable finance, which are aligned with the Paris Accord pathways. Companies are making bold decarbonization pledges, and yet many are uncertain how they will achieve these goals. How do you balance the need to deliver reliable, affordable energy while at the same time ensuring that it will avert negative impacts to the climate? How do you even start to replace or replicate an energy complex that society has built over the past 150 years The magnitude of this challenge is overwhelming, and there's much at stake. Emerging back from a decade of broken promises, carbon capture and storage is poised to be an effective and rapid opportunity for industrial point source emitters to decarbonize. While carbon capture and storage has existed as a process since the 1970s, it has largely been viewed as cost prohibitive. However, the changing landscape of carbon taxes, incentives, and carbon trading markets positions carbon capture and storage to play an important role to decarbonize our existing complex while maintaining the reliability and cost effectiveness of our existing systems that our societies rely upon. And as we have witnessed in Texas and California over the past year, disruptions in the delivery of energy to consumers and industry is very costly and dangerous to the well-being of our societies. It is from this place that I and my co-founder, Simon Vergazi, are reuniting to form Carbon Alpha and are joined by 6 former Jupiter employees with a shared vision of how we can play a role in assisting our national industries decarbonize. We are departing from the familiar grounds of the oil and gas industry and embracing opportunities in energy transition. Our offer is a sequestration as a service business model. We work with customers to help them deal with their carbon so that they don't have to. We take for granted that all industries in Canada have a grasp of what goes on below the ground, but most industries, other than the oil and gas producers, don't have any institutional wisdom regarding the subsurface or how to manage facilities and pipelines. We do, and we bring our entrepreneurial spirit to solve our industrial and decarbonization challenges. The Western Canadian Petroleum Basin has provided generations of wealth for Canada, but now we must reframe this basin to see the immense carbon storage opportunities before us. We have the chance to stop the national rhetoric about how Alberta's emissions are a blight on the national reputation and use our ingenuity to create the solutions by leveraging our technical know-how, our ability to fabricate equipment, a world-class energy regulator that is familiar with carbon capture and storage, and a mineral tenure system that is unique in the world. There are important policy decisions that the government in Alberta must make, which could provide for a thriving industry if they get it right. I believe Alberta could very well become a global leader in carbon capture and sequestration, not only by solving our existing industrial challenges, but also by attracting new industries concerned about their carbon performance to our geographically distributed opportunity set for carbon capture and sequestration all throughout the province, while at the same time providing competitively priced energy to support them. The carbon capture and the carbon capture and storage industry in Alberta started with Quest and Shell, managed every aspect of the CCS chain. However, I believe as the industry evolves, the single monolith participant will disaggregate, and there will be a myriad of services that will emerge to support the industry, which will create all sorts of value, added innovations, and micro industries. I like to close my speech by saying I'm a relentless optimist, and I'm optimistic about Calgary and Alberta. We have faced many challenges recently, but I'm optimistic because I have the great fortune to be able to see into what's happening within the city in the world of energy, the world of innovation, and new digital technology industries taking root in our incredible province. Like many of you, my career over the past 27 years has encountered some incredible challenges: energy crises, economic booms, commodity price crashes, financial crises, policy changes, a shrinking energy complex, and a global pandemic that we're still working our way through. And all of this has left scars on many of our hardworking Albertans, both in rural and urban parts of the province. I've chosen a path into an industry that doesn't really exist yet. I sense there will be opportunity, but know that there will be lots of disappointments along the way, and maybe some that we can't recover from. It's not the same thing that I did before, but it feels familiar. For those of you listening today who feel stuck or can't find your way back to where you were, perhaps there's another door opening for you that you might not have noticed before. I hope to leave you today with a sense of optimism. I want you to know that there's a movement of people, incredibly talented people, working to make this city and this province a better place for us, for our children, and for the next generation of Albertans. And you too will likely play a role in helping to move us forward. Thank you for being with us this morning.
That's the applause track. I've decided I'm going to introduce sounds into all of my sessions because I'm missing the crowd effect. And Patrick, you may not be aware about how many people are online, but lots of folks have been listening in. And so thank you very much for taking time today to share with us those perspectives. The Q&A box for those of you online is open for questions. And I'm going to start off, Patrick, because there will be many companies, people from companies listening who are smaller organizations, and they're going to be inspired by the fact that you at least in your talk, you made mention of working with small companies. Could you elaborate a bit on how Jupiter worked with small businesses and startups to break the mold on the traditional practices of the industry?
Sure, it's a great question, and I get asked that a bunch. And I think that the root of it is that when we started Jupiter, we were entrepreneurs. We understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, somebody starting a business, and so we're sympathetic to folks starting small companies and taking the leap to bring their technology to the market. Part of my experience was informed by my time that I got to spend at Creative Destruction Lab, where I got to work with small companies. I could see the pain points that they had. And one of them was the ability to interact with and get attention from energy producers so they could, at a minimum, be able to go in and test how their ideas might work within an organization. They just didn't have those internal insights. And so the opportunity to bring those companies in to meet with our engineers, just even conversations, would be extremely helpful. And I've always encouraged my peers in the industry to help support these groups because they can bring the types of solutions that we need. And all those smaller companies start out kind of lumpy and they're not really a clear solution for industry, but by working with them, in many cases, we found great solutions that both parties didn't really recognize at the onset of those conversations. So we made a point of really trying to work with those organizations because our industry needs solutions, third-party solutions to advance and make innovation happen. And so by supporting them, we're supporting that environment and supporting the generation of those solutions.
Yeah, it's also providing inspiration for young people who are entrepreneurial in their own right and want to give it a go, if you like. There's a question here from Mark. During your talk, you highlighted so many different things that the company tested and trialed, everything from better scheduling software to use of Spotfire to really thinking hard about data. Are there any technologies these days that really pop up on your radar as being the sorts of things that you see instrumental or really, really impactful for oil and gas in the future?
It's a great question. When you look out across all of the innovation and energy technologies that exist out there, there are so many. But I really believe that it comes down to really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. So a lot of times, I think that there's a misperception where companies may be looking for outside solution to some problem that they may be experiencing without really fully understanding what that problem is. And I think that, what we learned is that we had to get really clear on what the problem was that we were trying to solve for. And then we would try to go out and find those technologies. So it's hard to say, exactly, what technologies are going to solve problems for companies. And I can tell you that different companies have different problems. I had the great opportunity to speak with the folks at NAL that had great digital solutions, but they were very much focused on organizational challenges as it related to mineral tenure and all of the wells that they tried to operate. Our problems were really focused on some of the really challenging engineering problems associated with high temperatures and pressures. Very different challenge and problem sets. And so, we really kind of migrated to the solutions that we needed, whereas NAL migrated to a different set of solutions that they needed.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the challenges of change management? And I think I'm interpreting from a question that's on the front that's come in from Patrick Elliott, also carrying your name. I think the namings of the audience is causing my own sort of confusion. But apparently, you're asking yourself this very question. Can you elaborate a little bit on change management? That's probably is distinct from the management of change, but rather dealing with people and people change issues.
Yeah, it's and that's another a great question. I think we were successful at getting people aligned with the goals because we had commitment at the very top of the executive. Myself and my co-founders were all very committed to the concept of digital, and so by leading by example and really participating in that change, we could yes, how to manage change. You've got to have the executive buy-in at the top, and I was also very prescriptive about going through the organization and finding real leaders of change and people who would adopt, and I would make champions out of them as fast as I could. And then people would see that, and they would see that what they were doing and the success that they were having, and I would just really dig into those examples, and I found that to be a very useful technique. But it starts at the top, and it starts with people who embrace it and want to lead change within your organization. Those are really important people.
On your latest venture, Carbon Alpha, it's clearly your intent to get into carbon capture and sequestration as a service. How novel a venture is this for you and your colleagues? I mean, there's CCS is already done in Western Canada. The Weyburn project has been well announced. In Australia, the Gorgon project it couldn't even get kicked off unless it captured the CO2 from the big Gorgon field. So CCS isn't dramatically new, but where are you at with Carbon Alpha today, if you don't mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. I made remarks in my address that if we think about where the industry really is kind of globally, it's quickly evolving. But for certain, if we just focus on Canada, it really started with one big project proponent, which was Shell. It was largely government subsidized, and they managed everything from the capture, the transportation, and the sequestration. But I see a world where that starts to disaggregate, and just like the oil and gas industry, you've got all kinds of different companies playing parts of the role. So when you look at an oil and gas company, they don't own the drilling rigs, they don't own completion rigs. They have all kinds of services to support the activities that they create out in the field. And I think that that's where it's going to be in the future. But to be clear, there really is no industry at this point in time. The government of Alberta is still working through the process to release mineral tenure. It's a new business model, so we're in a process of trying to validate that. There's only a handful of participants right now in the industry, so it's very, very early days. It's exciting, but it's a pioneering opportunity for Albertans and for Canadians.
Yeah, and will be critically interesting around the world too, because a lot of when you think about what Canada exports, it's expertise, know-how, technologies around the world, and becoming good at this at scale could be a tremendous new export opportunity as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on report the ugly, find the fix? The reason I ask this is I personally was involved in what you invited me in one day to participate in this session. What did people tell you? Because the culture in oil and gas is to fear failure, and rightly so, because we don't want things to blow up. But how do you motivate people to want to come in and share what's probably been a big boo-boo and now they need help to fix?
That gets back to the heart of the culture that you want to create. We were very clear that if mistakes happen, and mistakes and and let's face it, operations do not always go the way that you plan. There's always challenges. There's weather. There's all kinds of conditions. We're dealing with large industrial equipment out in the field. Things don't always go the way that you would want them to go. And we understood that. But we understood that what was more important than getting upset at folks was the fact that there was an opportunity to try to really investigate what went wrong so that we don't repeat it. Repeating mistakes is a problem, but trying to uncover the mistakes and learn from it and improve our operations was really something that was really important to the success. And from those conversations that we had where people felt comfortable to bring it forward, we created a lot of solutions. And in some ways, it was a festival like type of atmosphere where, something hit the skids and we were going to do a rough. We got ready and, we had pins, and everybody who participated in the rough and brought it forward wore a pin, and many people wore those around on their jacket lapels with honor.
I think I even have one, actually. I should have dug it out for the occasion, even though I didn't play much of a role in that particular rough. But you're right; it was a fun atmosphere. Surprisingly, I was a little shocked by it. Actually, was people came in with some enthusiasm about being able to tackle a big problem. Going back to Carbon Alpha, another question that's come in from the panelists. Who is your likely target for Carbon Alpha? Is this going to be large point emitters, or is it going to be oil and gas companies? Is it abattoirs, cement plants? Where do you think the market is for such a service?
Well, I think at a high level that the energy companies in the oil and gas complex, you have all the skill sets to manage their own challenges as it relates to emissions. I think that we've seen recently that the oil sands players come together to deal with the carbon intensity from their operations, and I think that's fantastic. Like, that is leading Alberta leading out of the overhang of carbon that we have in this province. So I think it's a fantastic initiative that they've taken. But we're really focused on the folks that don't really have knowledge on the subsurface. And so if you think about power generation, agricultural groups, cement companies that you touched on, even midstream companies in Alberta, these are all people that are starting to do the arithmetic on the carbon tax and know that they have an issue. And not just the big companies. There's a lot of small emitters, small industrial groups that you would see in eastern portions of Calgary or Edmonton that have industrial processes that emit. All of them are going to be subject to the same tax, and they all need solutions. And so it's really those opportunities that we're looking to help and provide our expertise to bringing a solution forward.
Do you think? Can you look backwards and see if there was a specific tipping point here that has moved the industry to deal with this? I mean, was it Shell's losing their court case? Was it ExxonMobil getting their dissident board directors? Was it the IEA saying we have to halt all development? Is there such a thing as a tipping point, or did we gradually fade our way into a place where the province is now getting the issue with emissions reduction?
Well, I think we can look to south of the border. If you look at the United States, they started a tax incentive program called 45Q, where they have a series of tax incentives for that reward companies to put carbon into the ground, and it's a set dollar per ton that companies are awarded for. And they put that into place back in 2019, and that has set off a whole bunch of activity in the United States, far more than exists in Canada at this point in time. But I think in Canada, what's changed the trajectory was the most recent announcement by the federal government to increase carbon taxes progressively all the way through to $170 per ton by 2030. I think that has definitely changed the conversation in the last number of months, and we can see a significant pickup of activity and interest into that space.
Yeah, I think if you're a board member, you're going to be asking the finance function pretty quickly, what is the implication for our business with this tax structure? And you can draw a chart that shows you've got issues. I remember trying to get my parents to move out of their house when they were elderly. And the tactic I used was to show them how much fuel they were burning to heat their house and what their income was. And I showed them where the lines crossed. And the next day they put the house on the market. I mean, this is how you do this. You forecast out the future with best that you've got, and you work with that. A question here from Steve, who is curious if Carbon Alpha has played any role at all with Shell's efforts to date. I don't think you have, because Carbon Alpha is brand new, but just thought I'd check in anyway.
No, we haven't. The Quest project was really commissioned in 2015, and they've been operating successfully for the last 5-6 years. We've just put the wheels on Carbon Alpha here in the last 2 months, so we have not had a role to play in the Quest project. Right
on. All right. Any other questions from the floor? Otherwise, one that I had wanted to talk through here. What of the cultural features of Jupiter that you worked and developed, are you working to bring over into Carbon Alpha that you start up? And then at the same time, is there anything that you're going to jettison and say, you know what, we're going to move, that's no longer going to be something we're going to prosecute or incorporate in our future?
It's a great question. I think that we're at the phase now where we're starting, and whereas at Jupiter there was really 3 of us who started the company, and then we quickly added a handful of people, and that we used that to shape the philosophies and so forth that we wanted for the entire span of Jupiter. But today we're working with a young group of engineers, geologists, and data scientists. And we're actually kind of looking to them to help us shape our cultural touch points. But so many of the artifacts that we had at Jupiter are the things that attracted that team to continue to work with us and join us on this new journey. So I expect we'll have many architects that would be very similar, or architectural artifacts that would be very similar. I will say that when we started that OTC process at Jupiter, we had really just started it and didn't get a chance to complete it. I think that the team kind of wants to go supersonic on that this time around. So I would look for far more digital innovation coming out of the smart folks that know how to operate that stuff in our team.
Yeah, it's almost like Jupiter was the minimum viable product of a digital company, and now you're going to take it to the next generation and move it along. So it should be very exciting. It implies that there should be also opportunities for small companies to support you in your journey, because as you point out, you don't have all the answers, and you have to create the ecosystem and micro industries to support it. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. We're the same people, we're the same culture. We believe in innovation, we believe in entrepreneurs. And we don't have all the solutions. We know that there's very smart people out there that have far greater talents at certain things than we do, and we're going to need them. And I think our industry is going to need them to build the next set of solutions.
Well, and on that note, Patrick, I want to thank you on behalf of Energy Now Media and the conference for taking the time today to share your perspectives and also answer all of these questions. So thank you very much, everyone. A final warm round of applause, please, for Patrick.
Quick comment. I just thank you guys. Thanks, Patrick and Jeffrey.